even have the basic things to run a business. And frankly, I think you and Chris need some serious marriage counseling. It was late afternoon in our office conference room. Carl, our newest employee, had just told me what he thought was wrong with both my 15-year-old business and my 30-year-long marriage. How was I going to respond to that? How would you respond to that? Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters and guests, what is it in us that wants to criticize other people and tell them what's right? Why do we scoff at people who mistake a lectern for a podium? Or react on social media to something that's clearly fake news? We've all felt the urge to correct other people. Maybe some of us more than others. That afternoon, I was definitely feeling the urge to tell Carl just where he could put his opinion. Yet, because of Carl, I had learned I had a choice. We have a choice. Instead of getting sucked into correcting others and creating conflict, we can use curiosity to create healthy connections. Connections between other people, connections within ourselves, and connections with other people. Today, I'll share 3 ways you can break free from unhealthy conflict and move to a more productive space with other people. First, when we see other people getting locked in conflict, we can be the ones who use curiosity to invite them into connection. Second, when we find ourselves emotionally hijacked, we can use curiosity to own our reaction. And third, when we find ourselves in a competition to be more right, we can use curiosity to shift the game from winning to learning. Let's start with lesson 1, how I learned from my coworker Karen to use curiosity to create connections between other people. There, Carl and I were in that same conference room in a staff meeting in another heated argument. Carl had been on our 5-person team for a few months after a couple of decades at a big corporation. And Carl seemed to enjoy pointing out the many things he thought were missing in our business. Diana, I don't know why you don't even have something as simple as an action item list. Carl, just because you don't use our tools doesn't mean they don't exist. Have you even asked or looked for something? There was Carl, constantly criticizing and assuming. And that was me, criticizing and assuming right back. I found myself arguing about the specifics of whatever Carl said, and it didn't make anything any better for anyone. After some back and forth between Carl and me, our teammate Karen piped up. Carl, I'm wondering what your real concern is here. By asking a genuinely curious question, Karen helped shift the conflict. She moved the frame from whether we had a certain tool in place to learning what Carl was worried about. Well, I guess I'm worried we won't follow up on our decisions because we're not tracking them the way I know works. When we see something like this happening with others on our team, it's very tempting to keep our head down and get very interested in checking our email. But instead, we can learn from Karen that when we are off to the side and we're not emotionally hooked, we might be in the best place to help diffuse unhealthy conflict. We can use our curiosity to invite others into connection. On to lesson 2, how my coach Tracy taught me to use curiosity to own my reaction to difficult situations. Trust me, it can be hard to be curious about the other person's underlying perspective when you are feeling personally attacked. Yet when we find ourselves emotionally hijacked, we can be curious about our own feelings and own our reaction. My coach Tracy helped me explore naming my feelings as a way to shift the conflict. Rather than get caught up about the facts of a situation, instead I can share the impact I'm feeling. When I own my reaction, I show up in a real way. And you can't argue about the way someone is feeling. Owning our reaction creates a connection and can de-escalate the conflict. Speaking of conflict, let's go back to that conference room. This time, our team was trying to get clear on the strategies that would serve us for the next few years. After some brainstorming, I pulled out our collection of strategies we had from our last playbook, and I started sharing them with the group. Carl got quiet, real quiet. This is really draining my energy. Wow. Not only was he wanting to throw out any previous work we had done, here he was complaining and not even making any productive suggestions. I took a risk. Ouch, I'm feeling really criticized right now. I didn't mean to criticize. This just really isn't working for me. I felt good that I didn't stuff my feelings and ooze out negative energy. I didn't go on the attack. By naming my reaction, it allowed us both to step back and get curious about what had happened. Then we could figure out together how to move forward. Sometimes the best thing we can do when we feel attacked is to be curious and own our reaction. Ouch can help us create connection. This brings us to lesson 3, how I learned to use curiosity to shift the game from winning by being right to winning and learning together. Remember when Carl was starting to give me business and marriage advice? My first instinct was to shoot back with something like, Carl, what would someone who had never owned a business and is currently divorced have to tell me about running a business and marriage? Instead, I pulled out my magic wand of curiosity to help me not take his criticism as personally and be more open to what insight he might be able to offer. When I used curiosity to shift the game to learning, I started to find out he often had some worthwhile insights. When I got curious, Carl felt listened to, and he was able to take a more realistic perspective. We could come up with some shared strategies. Hard to hear? Often. Helpful? Sometimes. When I shifted the game to learning, I created a connection that served us both. The years that Carl was part of our business had a lot of good moments. And the way he showed up as a challenger gave all of us many opportunities to practice and improve our conflict skills. That's the great thing about a chronic problem. You don't have to get it right the first time because you'll have another chance to try again. Have you ever had a Carl in your life? If you ever find yourself in a situation where people are criticizing, taking things personally, and arguing about the surface facts, I hope you'll remember my story and get curious. These 3 practices aren't easy, yet just like eliminating filler words, you can do it with practice and help from others. When you see others get locked in conflict, remember Karen, you can be the one who uses curiosity to call them back into connection. When you find yourselves emotionally hijacked, remember my coach Tracy, you can use curiosity and own your reaction to get back into connection. And when you find yourself in a competition to be more right, you can remember that even though Carl had a rough communication style, he had some good points underneath. You can use curiosity to shift the game to learning to get back into connection. I'm curious, what connections will you create for yourself and others today? Mr. Toastmaster.